Hello everyone, today I'd like to present you some very important mods and settings for endgame content, particularly for tanking. The first one is EffectsUI, made by Icarus James. The mod allows to set up a display and tracking of visible or invisible buffs and debuffs on any target, be it the player, the enemy or the group. Let's immediately show what I'm talking about. In this example you can notice a buff with its duration and its icon appearing when I use my abilities, so I can clearly see the duration left on defensive cooldowns such as Rock Hard, which falls off here, and Thick Skin remaining. I can use Twist Fate, you can notice the backlash with its icon, and it basically allows me to have a correct view of my buffs and debuffs, and I can do my rotation correctly. Here you can notice the Pulverize buff with its duration, so I can at a glance know if and when I have to refresh it. Now let's see how this is made possible. Let's open the configuration window of EffectsUI. Don't worry, this looks scary, but as you can guess, everything is displayed only within a context. So there are some options here. This is a drop-down list where we'll most of the time select the show only listed buffs and effects option, and underneath you have a whole list of buffs where you'll have to write a buff's name. So for example, all these buffs will be displayed in this area, immutable being one of them. So as you can see, it's written here, and if I use immutable, it appears exactly in this zone in the middle. So you can make buffs appear on the left, and then if you have 2 or 3 buffs at the same time, they'll go from left to right. Mine appears in the middle, and then they expand from the middle if many of them are up at the same time, etc. Up to 5 different buffs. So now let's go through the whole process of creating a new tracker. Let's pretend we want to create a tracker for specifically immutables duration. So we have to click the plus button here. It creates a tracker on the bottom, on the right side of all your other trackers. You can scroll through them with the arrows. It has no name, so we can type the name here. Now we want to track immutable on ourselves, so in this list we have to select monitor player, and let's choose show only listed buffs and effects and type immutable here. Now the tracker appears in the center. We can drag and drop it anywhere, move it. It can take a shape of a bar or a box or a countdown, cast bar, whenever you want, whenever is available in this list. So let's keep it as bar. Timer is the display of the duration, so we want to keep it. Label is the name. You don't necessarily want to display the name, you don't care that much, because you'll have the icon of the buff, but we can leave it anyway. And the tooltip is the text which appears when we hover. We don't really care about this, so we cannot check it. And let's see how it works. Here you can see the bar with the duration, the label, and the icon, and it disappears when the buff is over. Now let's see how we can add some other buffs in this tracker, such as Rock Hard, Twist, Fate, and Pain Suppression. Alright, so as you can see, they appear in a column and they stack from bottom to top. So if I use them all at once, they stack from bottom to top, indeed. So this is obviously changeable. You can select stack upwards or stack downwards, and we can customize the size of the bars. So this is the size of, like, the horizontal size of the bar, and this one is the vertical one. And these settings depend on the shape you've chosen. so feel free to play with it. One other very important thing that this mod allows us to do is to track the offensive target's cast bar. What's different from the usual Funcom's cast bar? Well, the track during combat option. Basically, the tracker is like follows: monitor offensive target if you want to monitor the enemy. The tracking is checked, and here the show ability casts options is selected, and you can customize the interruptible or uninterruptible casts with a different color for interruptible casts. So for example, the interruptible ones are by default red, and the old usual ones, so the non-interruptible ones, will be green. The color is set here. Now, if you got your cast bar configured by EffectsUI, don't forget to disable the default display of the Funcom's cast bar. This can be disabled in the interface option, HUD display tab, and you uncheck show target cast bar in the target info. Now let's see what's the cast bar tracking about. I'm facing the mob, so I should see his casts no matter what. So as you can see, the casts appear in red because they are interruptible. Now I'm facing away from the mob, so I only briefly target him automatically when he hits me. Without tracking, I don't see his cast bar except briefly when he started casting it. Now I enable the tracking, and even if I'm facing away, I'll see his cast no matter what. As you can see here. I'm totally facing away, I'm running away from the mob, and I still see his casts. Finally, there is a way to import and export the EffectsUI configurations. You can do so by clicking on the wheel here. You have an export settings to text button. So basically you click on it and you'll have text appearing here. You can just select all and copy it. And if you want to import the settings, you just paste the text here. Now I'll show you something very important as well that you might have noticed in the previous clip. I'm talking about name tags. So you can go in interface options, HUD functionality, and find the name tags and select everyone in the health bars and check everything else. One of the most important things is to check the show name tag cast bar. Then in the HUD display, you go towards name tags and you select everything except maybe the show player's name tag, because you don't really care about seeing your name in the middle of the screen because you're supposed to know your own name, so that's kind of a useless info. And then you select full in the show hostile NPC name tags. Now if you take a look at the previous clip, we can see all the name tag options we've selected: name of the mob, HP, level, distance separating the player from the mob, the cast bar, and the name of the cast which is currently being performed by the mob. So this particular option is very useful for some endgame fights such as HE5, which is basically 3 bosses, and for example on the engage you want to focus target Brutus if you choose to kill Brutus first, but then within like the first 5 seconds, almost immediately, Iscariot will be casting Wrought Iron, and you'll want to, for example, interrupt it with the Bashosen gadget. So you'll be able to see him casting his Wrought Iron just under his name tag without even targeting him at all, which is very useful and very practical in this context. Now let's consider another import mod, which is Boo Builds, created by Boorish. This mod is a replacement for Gear Manager. So this mod allows to create an infinite number of builds without paying anything. since if you remember, the original build manager needs marks of favor to unlock slots 6 to 10, and you can only have pretty much 10 builds. You have no such problems with Boo builds. So let's see how this works. Right clicking on Boo builds icon allows to open the configuration window, and in the builds tab here you have some categories. By left clicking category you have all the builds available. You can right click a build, you have some options such as delete a build, and if you right click on the category by itself you also have some other options, and notably to create a new build. So let's create a build. We can leave everything checked by default. In this case we have skills, which are active abilities, passives, weapons, talisman, gadgets, animal location, agents. Click on OK and we can see the build appears here. Now let's load another build I have. We can see the abilities being loaded, the weapons, the gear, and even the agents. Now I can load the build I just created by left clicking it, and you can see the abilities are here and everything else. Now imagine you're tanking dungeons and on a given fight you'd like to replace Twist Fate, and it's passive by Evolution because you need an extra interrupt or an extra purge. So let's remove the passive and the active, and we put Evolution instead with its passive. So the problem is, if you want to replace some active or some passive abilities from fight to fight, and each time save a new build like this, let's call it Test Evolution, you'll end up having dozens and dozens of builds in a giant list, which isn't very practical. So the solution is not to create a new build here. So let's delete this. The solution is rather to use the quick build feature. So let's see how this goes. I already have some quick builds saved here, but it doesn't really matter. Let's save this new one. So right click, create a quick build. Let's name it Test Evolution. You can choose a build requirement for it. We can select our test build, which is the original build, and we can choose what to swap. So basically we want this slot to be Evolution and this slot to be Mass Evolution. We can leave the rest unchecked. Click on OK and it appears here. Now let's briefly also save the original one in the quick build. Let's just name it Test Twist Fate, because this one will have Twist Fate in the slot, and the requirement will be the test build original, and we want to check Twist and it's passive. So same slots as Evolution previously. So both quick builds appear here. Now let's see what's the point of these two quick builds we just created. I moved some buttons here. I left click on the tanking button, and we can find Test Evolution and Test Twist Fate quick builds here. So just by left clicking I can swap to the Evolution or to Twist Fate with this slot, and it doesn't matter if the other abilities are cooldown. For example, I can still swap in a click the skill and it's passive. So you can see Backlash passive here. And if I choose the Evolution variant, I have the Evolution passive here. Now, if I choose a completely irrelevant build I have, and I left click on the shield icon, we see we don't have the Test and Test Evolution builds anymore. This is because we selected the build requirement on these quick builds. So the build requirement would be the test build, and now we see again the Test Evolution and Test Twist Fate quick builds. So you can basically limit the display of builds according to the main build you chose as requirement. Now to position the buttons here, you go into Bool Builds, Options, and you click on Move Click Buttons, and then you can move it in your screen whenever you want. And that's pretty much it. One of the other features of Bool Builds is the favorite build bars you can see here. These are clickable buttons which allow you to switch to your favorite builds. To configure this feature, you have to click on the Faves tab. The rest is self-explanatory. You select a cell, one of your builds, then the background color and an icon, and you can see the build appearing here. You can switch in one click. You can also remove the build from the cell by selecting None in the Type field. You can move the bar with the drag bar one button, like this. And you can create second favorite build bar. And that's it. Finally, let's take a look in the Options tab of Bool Builds. The Throttle option defines how fast it'll take for the mod to switch your items when you switch builds. Keep it on fast. The other very important option is the Override Swap Weapons key. It will allow you to use the Swap Weapons keybind to switch from one to the other of your two last used builds. Now let's see how this works. Let's check the option and define the two last used builds. So we selected two builds so far. Now we can use the keybind to switch between these two builds. By default, the keybind is Ctrl R, but you can remap it in Controls, Combat, and then swap to alternate weapons. The problem with this option, however, is that it overrides the Swap Weapons keybind, which is actually very useful if you have an alacrity affix on your offhand weapon and something else on your main hand weapon. And if you want to get a speed boost from alacrity because you have to suddenly run during combat. Let's uncheck the option and see how it works. Now if we use the keybind, you can see your character switching weapons. This is the reason why alacrity is so popular on offhands. Now, if you have to suddenly run away, you can just use the keybind and switch to your alacrity weapon, and you just move faster. Now, be careful when you first install the mod, because the option is checked by default. Make sure to uncheck it, because if you want to push your gameplay skills to the very edge, this is a gameplay option you definitely do not want to get rid of. Finally, I'd like to quickly mention a last mod, which is called Advanced Weapon UI, made by Claire V3. This mod, as you already noticed, basically changes the weapon specialties. Here you have the hammer weapon specialty, with the displayed rage number here. This is very practical, at least for hammer, since you can exactly know how much rage you have, and when you get above 50, so basically you can exactly know when you're in rage. So as you can see, some weapons are modified, such as hammer, and some others are unchanged, such as chaos. I believe rifle is unchanged, fists is unchanged as well. Actually no, fists also display the exact number of fury you have. Pistols is changed a lot. You don't see the chambers anymore, you just see your current colors in each chamber. Shotgun is unchanged. Elementalism have the exact number of hit you already have, etc. The mod also allows to track some extra passive effects such as odds and evens by displaying the exact number of shells left, fix the game, which is a pistol's passive, it displays the time left until fixed game procs, and things like the internal cooldown of the pneumatic mode. So that's it. I've just covered all the mods and settings which I consider mandatory for in-game content. Keep in mind that I didn't cover all the options, so just feel free to explore and to tweak all the options you want to your preferences. And I'll leave a link to my EffectsUI configuration in the description of the video for those who want to import it and play with it. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.